Hello, dear listener. You join us once again as we go behind the scenes at the offices of Pilot Views.
Pilot Views offices, Kay speaking. Dan and Justin aren't taking calls right now. Please call later. Pilot Views offices, Kay speaking. Dan and Justin aren't taking calls right now. Please call later.
Here at Pilot Views, we run a really tight ship, kind of like a radio ship, sailing the airwaves. And just as any good ship needs a captain, a podcast needs a good host. Am I a good host? Well, I've heard people use the word great, and I wouldn't want to be rude enough to say they're not speaking the truth. So yeah, you could call me a great host. But I'm more than just a brilliant host. I'm also an amazing friend. As I always say...
And don't forget, Dan, Justin, your co-host who...
Assistant co-host to the main host, Justin.
As assistant co-host to the main host, I make sure everything is okay, perfectly running order, and ensure the ideas keep flowing.
Talking of ideas, as the idea man, people always come up to me and ask, Dan, where do you get your brilliant ideas? They're just so inspiring.
They don't say that, Dan.
As I was saying, people say, where do you get your great ideas? Well, great ideas are grown, like a tree in a forest. You start with the seed of an idea, you add the layers of research, pretty much like earth and compost. You water it, you feed it with love, and from that fascinating seed, a great tree grows.
So you're saying it takes 20 years for you to get a good idea? As co-host...
Assistant co-host to the main host, Justin. And no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that with great power comes great responsibility and sometimes great excuses, but mostly responsibility, which I sometimes delegate to you.
Another rule we live by is that customer service is simple. Always under promise and over deliver. Except for me. I always over promise and hope for the best.
Exactly. What I'm saying is, come in.
Hi, Dan. Sorry to interrupt. I have the monthly HR reports for you to sign.
Joey, no, we don't even have a HR department. You weren't even part of the skit. How did you get here? Get out, Joey, get out.
Yeah, Joey, get out.
Oh.
I'm so angry. Everybody, conference room, 5 minutes.
Oi.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Pilot Views, the podcast episode that takes a look at the pilot episode of a series. With me, as always, for this sub-series is Justin from the Movie Wire. Hiya, Justin.
Dan, it's always good to see you in the wee hours of the morning for me to talk about TV.
And I've been wanting to record that skit for ages with you.
That one, I think, hands down to the writer here. That one is my favorite.
Do we reference someone now? Should we say hi to him now?
Absolutely. I mean, that one was totally dedicated to Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema podcast. It was made from Dan with love.
Hi, Antonio. And just like any good TV show has a cast, I want to say thank you. The voices you heard in there. So you heard Kay from the F My Work Life podcast. You heard Joey from the Game Club pod and two blokes from Blighties. And if I sorted my act out, you'll also have heard Josh Wilson from Super Familiar with Wilson. So thank you to all of those. And Justin, obviously, thanks to you for being a willing participant in these.
Thanks for saving me for last. I mean, assistant to the regional manager. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less.
Oh, I did have a smile on my face when I was doing this. Right. So, yeah, we decided, I think, didn't we say after having tackled Dexter, 8 series of that, we thought we'd do something a bit more lighthearted again and something sort of quick to watch. And I think you might have suggested, or we probably did both settle on the Office, the American version, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed right. I mean, we kind of went down a dark tunnel of just a serial killing and just overall characters that just have a negativity about them. And this one was a kind of a positive conversation, I think. And we knew this show was going to come eventually because it's hard to have a show surrounding pilots and TV and not include the legendary comedic writings of The Office. And this one I'm excited to talk about because I think this one, everybody can relate to, and it's like Friends. It's hard to avoid watching anything with The Office. So there's hardcore fans, and there's some that just kind of turn it on just to feel good.
Yeah, and if you haven't watched it, which there's probably some people, but you've seen a meme of it, you've heard a joke. That's what she said. That show, if it didn't create that, I'm not sure if it did or didn't, but that's what made that popular, right? So you've seen something from or heard something related to that. And I'm going to be honest with you. When push came to shove on this, I actually felt intimidated is probably not the right word, but I think I felt a bit in awe of tackling this one because it's almost where do you start? Because you mentioned Friends, and yeah, that's a 10-season run of a show, but I think that's fairly straightforward to pick up and review and look back at, right? But The Office feels like there are so many layers, so many subplots, so many ways you could look at it.
Yeah, I mean, if you even look at season 1, it seemed like it was going to be like a one-trick pony where it's just going to bank on this very simplistic plot, this setting, these characters of following it around a paper company. I mean, where can it go with this? And we saw that from the UK version of it only being 2 seasons. This one was very clever and had very clever writing, not to discredit the UK version because that was brilliant. But this one banked solely on the characters and almost placed seeds on where these characters were going to go to last 9 seasons. And this is not only a prime example of intelligent writing, we want to give the writers the credit, but at the same time, improvisation to the comedic actors in this one that really helped grow these characters. So this one, I think, is brilliant in so many layers, like you spoke about. There are layers when it comes to the characters, but there are layers when it comes to the performers as well of where these characters went by the end of the series run.
Absolutely. This is a great show in whichever way you look at it. But what we'll do, because I really want to get stuck into this, we'll have a quick ad break and then, yeah, we'll get straight into it.
Join me, Tim, and my co-hosts,
Slade and Joey,
at the Game Club podcast, where once every 2 weeks we review video games not too dissimilar from a book club. Find us on all your favourite podcast providers.
This is Luke from the Nerdstalgia podcast, and you're listening to Casting Views, a member of the PodPack Collective.
And we are back. So, Justin, as I said, I've been looking forward to talking to you about this one. We're not specifically going to talk about the British version, but I wanted to ask, and I think you alluded to it. Have you seen the British show?
I have. Actually, the last couple of days, I kind of binged through it because I remember watching the first season, but never really got into the second season. It was hard for me to get into the second season of it. But yeah, I binged it the last few days, and not to discredit it, but at the same time, I love how the US version actually did take a lot of commitment and a lot of the writings and ideas from it to really make this an origin story of where this show went.
So the British show came out very early. It was probably 2000, 2001, right? Or 2001, 2002, something like that. And it's a very different beast, isn't it? I think the American show went hard for the sitcom element of it, whereas I think the British one felt a little bit more fly on the wall documentary in that sense. But I'll come on to that later about the whole mockumentary. But yeah, I think the British version, because it was only 12 episodes, 2 seasons of 6, the characters couldn't really expand. They couldn't breathe. So yeah, the David Brent character, the Michael Scott of the British version, doesn't necessarily come off as good. I think that's where the American show has the advantage because it knew from the outset that it was going to have room to grow, right?
This is an example of when America takes an idea or concept from the UK or whatever country it may be. We have the tendency of going over the top with it. We have the tendency of really going all in on almost to a ludicrous level. But in this case, this is one that actually does work because I think kind of what you touched on, the UK version, there is kind of a darker tone per se, or a reality, more strict reality feel to it. The American version, like you said, is a complete sitcom. They went with a brighter version. They went with almost louder characters that really stood out. And it really does grab your attention right from the get-go. It takes a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the ideas that the UK version had, but it really just goes. And again, we can leave this to Steve Carrell, that just really added that more amplified cringe factor to his character. Ricky Gervais does a fantastic job, but Steve Carell, this is one that you really almost have to cover your eyes in the first season to 2 seasons on the things that come out of his mouth and how he reacts to it.
Steve Carell, I mean, what a guy in this. So that's it. And you know, we may touch upon the British version at some points. As I said, I want to focus on the American one. And I remember when I spoke to you, I said, I kind of want to look at your experience with the show, or our experience with the show. Take a look at the pilot episode, have a look at later episodes and high and low points, maybe of the series as a whole. Take a look at the finale, how the characters have evolved. And maybe then, well, not maybe, definitely want us to pick our favourite characters and 2 or 3 episodes if we can limit it to that. So it ran between 2005 2013, got 9 seasons. And depending on where you look and how they group the episodes, so you're looking at around 201 episodes. Now, it is clearly obviously based on the English show, and the pilot, whilst not a shot-for-shot remake, takes the script and uses that as a baseline. Now, do you remember sort of your initial introduction to this show and when you started watching it?
Well, I didn't start watching it right away when it launched. I think it was probably into season 3 when I really started getting into it. And it was one of those that I kind of got stuck at home and I needed something to watch. And this one, I started the first pilot episode, and it was a what in the actual hell kind of moment of am I watching? But at the same time, this was relatable to me. I really connected with these characters of the workplace. Me being a young leader at the time when this came out in a work environment, I related to a lot of the stuff Michael Scott was doing, and I felt myself really glued to this character, even reflecting on some things I did as a young leader that really made me cringe upon some actions of myself. So there are a lot of subtle things that he does that really resonates, and they really bend on that relatability factor, not necessarily focusing on the paper company, but the human nature of it. So I fell in love with this show from the first, I think, 3 episodes of getting into it. And I look forward to every episode after. It's one of those that I had to play catch up to season 3. And I was disappointed that I had to wait for more. And I really wanted more. It's an addictive show, not because of plot twists or stories, but to see what the characters are going to say next. And I love every character of this show.
I came to the show very late, and the reason being is I don't believe this show aired on UK TV. It would have been on streaming services. And yeah, so you look in 2005, 2013, I probably didn't even get sort of anything like Netflix till well after that. So I think I would have had the advantage of having the whole series. And then even then, I may have stayed away from it for a bit because I did hold the original, the UK version, in such high regard. But yeah, I agree with you. I think once I started watching it, the characters just from the get-go, I think are just brilliant. And something that will come through. If you're watching it now, like, again, my wife this will be a program where she dips in and out with me when I'm watching it. You know, the characters, and we said it in a lot of sitcoms, it happens, like Frasier, they are mean to each other, right? There is a lot of meaning, but I think that is the medium to getting the laughs, the comedy out of it. But ultimately, they always have those episodes where they're there for each other. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what saves it from being, you know, the characters being unlikable, because it is a fine line to tread, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's where it goes into the relatability factor, because we've all been there. We all have those coworkers that we just, you know what, they annoy us to the brink, but at the end of the day, if they ever ask for a favor, we're there for them. It's almost like a family, and you hear a lot of businesses and workplaces call their team a family. To an extent, you may cringe at that word, but at the end of the day, there's some truth to that, because you're with these people 5 days a week, 40 plus hours, whatever it may be. And you can sometimes see them more than your kids. So, and there's some conflict with family. And even though the show doesn't really go out there and say it, the viewer feels it. And I know I felt it, because we're in this room, we're in this cubicle, small area, forced to view these characters interact. We understand these conflicts, and especially one of the early episodes where Jim puts the stapler in the Jell-O just to have some fun. So there's some antics there that is wholeheartedly intended to have some fun in a boring paper factory or whatever it may be. So there's a lot to this that we can cringe at, and we can say that was mean of this character to say this or do that, but there's never hatred to any of the characters, and that's the talented writing and the performances, because we love all these characters that are on screen. There's even when we take the Dwight character, and I know we're going to get into a huge conversation. He's an annoying character, but we love him for his antics. Just like we all have that one person in the workplace that we can say, God, he's annoying, but God, he's a lot of fun too.
And that's what I think this show does really well. It nails the office life, especially at that time. So we've got to remember now, it's over 10 years old. The final season, it aired, it will be his 20th anniversary next year. So especially at that time, those offices, that life was going to be almost spot on. Now, I remember, and again, this will be the last time I intentionally reference it, when the original one aired, the British one, I had a manager at the time who almost wanted to be David Brent. You had those jokers in the office. They then did start doing the office equipment in jelly or jello. You've all worked with that person who, like you said, irritates you, the person you want to wind up. There's always that office romance there. And I think this show does it really well. And no doubt, as we'll come on to it as well, for me, it didn't use the documentary or the mockumentary as a gimmick. It did that. It maintained it. And I think it's one of the best shows to do that. So, for example, like Modern Family is another show I really like. But that felt like after a few seasons, it almost dropped the idea that it was a documentary about the people. Yeah, you get the talking heads to camera. But this, it made no bones that there was a film crew going around filming. And when we get to the finale, we'll kind of talk about how that finishes. So those two things for me make this a standout show is one, the fact it nails on the office life, and two, the documentary a style of it really adds to it. And three, I think the characters, the actors are really great in it too.
Like shows like Parks and Rec that did the same thing. And to me, that show, even though I love the show, went really amplified in the sitcom feel. So, I forgot that was almost shot as a documentary type style. And you're right, The Office succeeded in that, because even when you get to the last season, they bring that crew into the story. They break that fourth wall, and they really find a way to play tribute to these guys, where it's almost like a love letter to what they've done over the last 9 years. So that's what I loved about that. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, in a bit. But a lot of the danger to the shows that came out is really holding on to that feel, but really going too sitcom-y with it, where I'll still watch it. I still like the characters. I still like the comedy to it, but let's just call it what it is. This isn't the same show as what we got in the very first season. So, and The Office does hold true to that. And I think they do a brilliant job on keeping in character of the look, the feel, and what they're trying to accomplish, even in the 9 seasons.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's perfect. There are definitely some things I didn't like about the run, which I'll talk about as we go in. But let's have a look at the pilot. So, if I remember right, the pilot was actually filmed 6 months before the rest of the season. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say is, didn't it have the most inconsistent episode count over its life? I know what part of it was. There was one season where it was hampered by the writer's strike, the original one, if not the recent one. But, the first series was only about 6 or 8 episodes as well, wasn't it? Then you have series 7, I think, or 5, which is 28. It just feels really weird, the amount of episodes they have.
They did whatever the hell they wanted. You could have a season of 12, a season of 26. It doesn't really matter. It's the inconsistency of the work life. So it's whenever they have time to get everything done. They're not too up on time management. I get it. But yeah, it's totally inconsistent. But the magic of it, though, and even though you said you didn't like some of the things in it, and shut your mouth, Dan. So there is not one bad thing about this show. I'm just kidding. I'll get into it. I have some hatred towards the last bit of the seasons. But the inconsistencies, the magic of it is they don't feel like they're short. They don't feel like they haven't accomplished anything. There is 9 seasons, and each season retakes something away, even if it's a shorter season. So to me, I think the writers and the creators of this show really tapped into their creativity to create a story that doesn't feel like it shortchanges the viewer.
Right. So, Justin, I was going to ask you this question at the end, but I'm going to ask you it now. So, for me, I can't remember if I've already said, but I didn't get to watch the whole series all the way through from series 1 to 9. But for me, the show definitely falls into, and I think naturally for a lot of people, two areas: Steve Carell and non-Steve Carell. And for me, the Steve Carell bits are the bit I get drawn to more often. I'm not saying the other actors or the rest of the seasons weren't great, but if they'd have finished it in season 7, I'd have been happy.
Yeah, I mean, when we lost Steve Carell and we got introduced to James Spader, Will Ferrell, I mean, it was fun in its own way, but Steve Carell really did make that, and I think he went on to bigger, better things, sure, but I think I was actually impressed with the amount of interest I still had because of the supporting cast. Yeah, it took a little bit of adjusting to get used to Steve Carell not being there. I think the writers were smart on introducing some big names as some humor to it to keep our interest, to almost give a alley-oop to get the rest of the seasons going. So I think we see the payoff not necessarily in the moment that season that Steve Carell exited, but we see that in kind of the final 2 seasons where this cast is there to entertain by themselves, and I think for what it is, they do a fantastic job because I was still engaged with the outcome. We go from pure comedy to adding a little bit of heart to it, and they knew they had to add something more than comedy to keep interest. They had to add that heart. That's why we see that more focus on the Jim and Pam dynamic. We see more with Rainn Wilson and Angela, that dynamic. So there's a lot of elements they throw in here to really forte the heart that these performers have to improvise with, not just improvise on the comedy. And I think my hat's off to them because this really shows the range of this cast of talent because they're not banking solely on comedy. I think this one was smart to show a lot of the range that these performers can do. And some of them really went on to do other things that really, I think, more so the last bit of the seasons, almost slingshot like Jim Krasinski's career that show that he's not just there for comedy. He can actually put some heart or some thought into what he's writing or how he's performing. So I think this one really did help more so than the first half of the series did. So I think the back half really helped these talents' careers.
Yeah, and I think that's where my issue is. So you had Will Ferrell take over, in essence, from Steve Carell, and I think his character was a bit too far out there. And I know it was intentional, but that kind of spoilt the rhythm for me. And then you had James Spader, who, not saying he was bad, but just like you said, I think the interaction and the relationships then between those who remain, so Jim and Dwight towards the end, maybe that could have been bought sooner. Maybe they didn't have to try to get these big bosses. I think that's where my head's at, that the relationship there was there all along. Jim and Dwight, who knew that they would be, well, we saw them as a great double act at the sparring, but maybe make them the joint managers, and there's that whole new dynamic between them.
Yeah, and we saw what could have been with the Jim and Dwight characters, and to me, I think the timing was perfect. It wasn't too much, it wasn't too little. I think it was satisfying. I think where
Yeah.
we had the pivot, where we had James Spader as Robert California, that character was polar opposite to Michael Scott. This is the manager we fear. This is the manager that still adds
Yeah.
that relatability. Only in the polar opposite. We have the goofy manager that really we can relate to because we've all been there. Then we have the absolutely terrifying manager that we want to impress and we want to do well for to an extent. So there's a very smart relatability here, and the actors have to bank on their awkward interactions with Robert California, with James Spader, to really push that comedy to a relatable level because again, you have to bank on we've all been there. We've all sweated when the boss comes in. And James Spader does a fantastic job on knocking that role out of the ballpark.
And what a name, Robert California.
power name.
Yeah, so let's take a quick look at the pilot then. So the one thing that surprised me was that pretty much all the characters there, bar one, so Meredith wasn't in the pilot, or not the Meredith we know anyway. So you've got Steve Carrell as Michael Scott, Rainn Wilson as Dwight, John Krasinski as Jim, Jenna Fischer as Pam, BJ Novak as Ryan, and Melora Hardin as Jan, who I think she has an evolution as a character, right? David Denman as Roy, Leslie David Baker as Stanley, Brian Baumgartner, Kevin, Angela Kinsey as Angela, Oscar Nunez as Oscar, Phyllis Smith as Phyllis, Creed Bratton as Creed. So yeah, Meredith wasn't, or Kate Flannery wasn't in the pilot because I think they had someone else who was another comedic actress, but she couldn't be available. I love those stories. She wasn't available when the show came to film. Daryl also wasn't in the pilot episode. And then obviously there were two other main characters I thought that came much late. You've got Andy as Ed Helms. Ed Helms as Andy and Ellie Kemper as Erin. Actually, one thing I haven't got there was Mindy Kaling in the pilot. I may have missed her off, actually.
I believe she is, because she's in the second episode of the diversity one. So I'm pretty sure we see her in the pilot episode. But we don't really see a forte on her character till we get to that diversity episode in episode 2.
So yeah, that's it in terms of the main cast and crew. Now, in the pilot though, however, really it was only Michael, Dwight, Jim and Pam, really, wasn't it? So you had them all there, but they were the ones really who had and possibly BJ Novak as Ryan, because he's obviously the main almost like vehicle of that. So what was your take on the pilot as an introduction to the show?
This is where they're all figuring each other out, and it is completely cringy. Not necessarily that it's done horribly. It's intentionally cringy, and it feels real. It feels natural because this is the pilot, where the pilot is always lower budget, really kind of amateurish looking. This is where the roots and the seeds really piqued interest, because this is the type of pilot that just works because it fits the dynamic of the characters, the dynamic of what the writers are trying to do. It's a visual train wreck because you really want to see what these characters are going to do or say. And it put me on the edge of my seat, especially when you see Michael Scott walking BJ Novak around the office. It's utterly hard and just to watch because it is awkward to the point where you just curl your toes in embarrassment and you almost have to look away from the screen. And that's what it does fantastic, is really make me want to go into episode 2 and say, what in the hell is going to happen next?
As we said, it does mimic the UK version in that sense. And I think, again, it's a great idea to have them introduce an attempt to the office because, like you said, that then gives him the opportunity to do the walk around. And also show him to be that cringy self he is, where he's got to be the funniest person. He's got to be the most liked person. For me, though, the interesting thing about the pilot, though, is Michael does come across as less likable, again, because you don't get an opportunity to show that heart of gold he does have. So he does just come across as like a cringy, bumbling, rude boss, doesn't he?
Absolutely. And we really don't find out too much about Michael Scott until the seasons go on, but there is something about him that you almost feel sorry for. Is he has to self-praise. He has to call himself the world's greatest boss. He has to narrate his actions of why he does things. And again, that's part of the documentary style, but he wants to be liked. We get those subtle hints that he wants to mean well, he wants to do well. But nobody's given him the credit, so he has to do it himself. He has to let people know why he's special. It's almost sad, where we want to feel empathy towards him. So it's a very hard balance between dislike and wanting to feel sorry for him, on who this boss really is. So I think, to me, I never disliked Michael Scott when it came to the pilot episode or the first season. I felt sorry for him. And that's what really led to the cringiness of it, is you really want to see him really get along with his coworkers, but he just won't shut his mouth.
Yeah, you bring up that mug. It's brilliant because, like he said, he bought that himself. And it's constant seeking of approval that he throughout the show. Now, what I mean about he just comes across as unlikable in that is because he does make a couple of horrible jokes towards Pam. So like when he introduces Pam, he says, "Oh, if you think she's cute now, you should have seen her a few years ago." And he does that whole fake firing towards her, reduces her to tears. But at that point, you don't know that they have got a relationship. He absolutely sees her as a daughter, doesn't he? Especially by the end of it. And it just comes across as just, and it is, but mean. And he's got a different look, and I'm not sure if it is. I think it's the hair. I know it's 6 months later. Maybe they did take a look and say, right, we've got to just tone it down a little bit to make him at least seem a bit nicer.
100%, because open and honest, this hair made me angry. Looking at the slick back style, I'm like, for the love of God, who put Steve Carrell on screen with this hair? It is sleazy, it's gross, it's used car salesman. I don't know if that's what they envision this character to be, but it really contradicts what Steve Carell is trying to do. And this makes Steve Carell really try and work harder to gain that likability, because the appearance, and I'm solely banking on his hair here, doesn't give us any sort of likability. Out of anything, I take it back, Dan. When I said there's something I hated about this show, it is that hair. Because when we look at season 1, that's the first thing I think of now that you brought it up. And I'm not going to get this out of my head for the rest of the day of how angry this hair made me.
I'm really sorry. But it's also, I think in that pilot, he doesn't have a jacket on, does he? And the shirt's big. He just looks like, I can't think of the right words, but he just looks almost like a pompous boss. And like I said, we know that isn't him. Yes, he can be mean. He can be self-indulgent. I mean, we mentioned the mug. He's trying to make the temp laugh. He's trying to show the temp that he's the best. I think he says, when he's conveying his style to Rainn, he says, "I'm a friend first and a boss second." What we're seeing, I think, is almost at times like a little boy in a man's body or in a man's world, aren't we? He still feels at times extremely lost. It's almost like the Chandler character, isn't it, in Friends, that his form of getting people to like him is the comedy, right? It's just that Michael Scott doesn't know when to tone it down.
Yeah, 100%. And if we even look on the sub layers here, is the characters are going to be prominent, but let's look at the environment that these characters are playing in. A lot of these characters, by the end of the season, have worked for this small paper company for 10, 12, 15 years, whatever it may be. They're in this office, they're in this environment. And when we take, I might be going a little too deep here, but when we take a lot of these middle-aged workers in this environment, there is going to be a want to be relevant. There is going to be, what am I contributing and how am I going to be recognized? How am I going to stand out? This is a natural human reaction that's almost brilliant that they actually amplify this going into the seasons. Is when we go into the workforce, our careers, we take pride in, because if we pick a career, we're going to be doing this 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it may be. Yeah. And these are the ones, if you pick this career that you just get complacent in, and this is where you end up, not that it's a bad thing, but you are going to find ways to try and make yourself relevant. And I think that is a very prominent aspect of Michael Scott, is that he wants to be relevant, because at the end of the day, he's a nice guy, but he just works at a paper company and he wants more. And that's where we kind of see him going into the last bit, where we go to his exit, where he finally gets his wish, where he does get more.
It is interesting, isn't it, that in the pilot that it sets the stall out for the characters. So bang on what you were saying, like Jim doesn't want to be there. It is just a job for him. So that's set out from the start. The other characters, they're pretty much happy. They might not think they're in the best job, but they're all happy there doing their 9 to 5. You've got Dwight is almost like the reverse. Well, no, not the reverse, but the reverse Michael Scott, in that he's desperately trying to please Michael and be his best man after him, but in the opposite way of trying to be as alpha as he can and as good at his job as he can. And like you said, I think you do get that glimpse of sadness. And I'm not saying that should necessarily forgive everything he does mean-wise to people, but he's very sad, isn't he, Michael Scott? And I mean that he is internally sad, not he's a sad, sad man. you could tell he's crying out to have the wife and kids and that house with the picket fences, isn't he? That's his dream, but it doesn't happen. Well, not till late on.
Well, and he's super desperate, and we kind of to have that dream, and we see that when he puts on his persona of Cool Mike, where he's on a date and he puts on that backwards hat to impress a date. But when we take Dwight, and I think this is part of the brilliance of it, Dwight, he has this confidence. The confidence is already there. He's content because he has his beet farm. He has something he feels is very relevant to contribution. He's not trying to change himself. He's trying to change the environment. He wants the environment to change around him to be as relevant as he sees himself. And that's where I think the chemistry between Dwight and Michael are really there, because you have one trying to change the setting and one that really is trying to make himself relevant in this setting. This is where I always say that the setting is utterly important, because this is one of those that the characters are trying to change it, and this adds to a lot of chemistry and a lot of banter between the characters going into the future seasons.
And I think this is why this series is hard to solely speak about the pilot, because, as I said, the pilot really does only focus on a very small handful of characters. And of course, another character I've forgotten to mention, who is brilliant for the limited sort of time he's in, is obviously Toby. Like I said, I think the opening episodes set everything up perfectly. So Michael, the type of character, he is the potential romance between Pam and Jim, because at this point Pam is still, or she is engaged to Roy. You've got the Michael and Dwight relationship, and then you've got everyone else in the background. So I'm happy now to start kind of widening this out. The other thing I forgot now, and it's probably fine saying now because we are going wider, I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to Angela Kinsey and Jenna Fischer on the Office Ladies podcast. I don't know if you've listened to that.
It's one of those I've always seen and wanted to dive into, but I've never listened.
Oh, I do enjoy it. It's just because it's more Office. But they did say that at the start, Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant, the UK creators, gave them 2 bits of advice, knowing that they were going to make it an American sitcom. They said, in America, you couldn't have a bad boss be a bad boss for too long. He would get fired quickly. So they said, you've got to make him a good salesman or show glimpses of that. And I think we absolutely do. And Stephen Merchant also said, for the show to last, focus should be on the love story between Pam and Jim. And again, that is a thing. And I've got some issues with that towards the end of it. But when you look at that and you hear that, it's obvious to say it in retrospect, but those are the 2 key things for me that stand out. I mean, there are a handful of episodes where Michael, because in the pilot, he's actually said he's been there for 12 years. So ultimately, he's then had a 20-year career at this paper company. He absolutely loves the clients, loves the job. And when it comes down to it, he pulls his socks up, he pulls his sleeves up, and he's out on the road doing those sales. I mean, there's the gift basket episode for me always kind of cracks me up as well.
The thing when we take Michael Scott, I mean, his work habits are there. He just says stupid stuff. We all know that guy. His heart's in the right places. Work habits, hit or miss, but at the end of the day, he's there to really do his job. And I think that's the lead by example when it comes to not having that dislike of the character. Is he's at least willing, like you said, roll up his sleeves and get in there with his team, and also try and be relevant and there for his team. Even though some horrible advice, he still makes the attempt, which is a likable factor. And you kind of brought it up, and I kind of want to talk about it, unless you say, shut up, Justin, I'm going to get there, is the Pam and Jim relationship. This is one that I know you're going to have an opinion on. And when we take series like this that really add that that relationship factor, where you're very meticulously looking at these 2 characters on when they're going to get together, because you know it's going to happen, but when, it always fails and it ruins the seasons going forward. I remembered my childhood trauma watching Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. When Lois got with Superman, I was done with it because everything was horrible by the end of the seasons. This one doesn't, in my opinion, ruin the seasons. I think it's handled very delicately, and they grow upon it, where we want to follow this crescendo of the relationship. And I think it was in season 3 that it's a beautiful scene where you can see different aspects of where this relationship can go. So, and I think going forward, they handled it very strategically and they did a brilliant job. I do have some issues in the final couple episodes in the final season, but I think between 3 and 9, it's a respectable job.
Spot on. Again, I can only agree with you. I made my feelings clear that I think the original run of Frasier ended for me when Niles and Daphne got together. I found that really spoiled then the momentum or the relationship they all had. I think the only thing is, so they portray that relationship as a really, it's great on screen, you know, that innocent, that flirting romance in an office. We've seen it all. Some of us may have been in something like that, the unrequited love because someone's in another relationship. But it's all very, what's the word? It's very genuine, very nice. I can't think of a better word, but it's nice. Now, for me, the only thing pre their relationship is, you know, the way Jim treated Karen, Rashida Jones. I thought that made him look a little bit of a not so nice person. But
Player.
you know,
Got
she
it.
then she gets her sort of good ending. She gets her job, etc. Then when they got together, no, it didn't spoil it at all for me. You know, was Roy hard done by? I think they did a good enough role of making him look like a slobby, uncaring boyfriend. So I'm glad he got a good ending as well when you see him come back. The only thing for me is, and I know you have to throw in a bit of tension, I think they tried to play on their relationship coming under stress a couple of times. You had her moving to New York for the art class, and then there was something about the cameraman, wasn't there, when Jim was away? And it's like, I almost could have done the her going to art school, I think, was a good one. And you can see that because it fit in with the character. But then the one with the cameraman at the end or the sound man, just felt like it was thrown in to try scare the viewers a little bit.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And, you can only, in its defense, but I totally agree, you can only put these two characters in a single setting in so many directions that doesn't relate to office drama. Because I know with Rory, we had the finding out of these two and then having the punch and then the mace, which was a fantastic episode that I thought the balance was great there. But I think they tried to spider web it where it felt unbalanced, throwing these different obstacles out. Because, yeah, we had the art school, we had Jim creating an investment or a different company. They're always hinting at leaving the company. So it was always something in a season where I would have wholeheartedly liked to see a focus maybe on another set of characters that really didn't have that forced reaction of just Jim and Pam on what's going to happen to them next. I would have loved to see a bigger focus on, Dwight. I know BJ Novak had a big part of it too, where that was probably the weakest of the seasons where they had to kind of pivot and bring back to a focus of Jim and Pam. So I think there is some opportunity there that felt a little forced. So I'll agree 100% on that one.
And touching is probably the word I wanted to bring. That sounds wrong out of context, but I mean, their relationship
Tell
was
me
touching.
more.
And it's funny when you look at relationships through the characters. I mean, Dwight has a fair share as well. I mean, again, how him and Angela treat Andy is wrong. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't see the latest series prior to this, but then Andy, how he treats Erin as well. So there's that was a weird relationship. And then Dwight is with the other farmer daughter lady towards the end. So Dwight, I mean, for how odd a character he is, he gets his fair share of romance.
That I will never understand, especially with the girl, the love interest in the last season. I mean, what the hell? But it's office romance. I mean, I get it. At one point, you're gonna have like everybody dating everybody at some point. I mean, it's hard to not think of a job we've had in the past that didn't end with that. That's how I met my wife. It was a complete love at first sight kind of deal, but at the same time, we didn't really interact for about 3-4 months. We would just do small cheesy jokes, and I would embarrass myself and bow my head in shame, clocking out for the day. So it's an office romance that, to me, it felt real, even though Dwight is Rainn Wilson is a real oddball. But when you can find these characters 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, there's gonna be some romance at some point. And where we see it here, we see it across the board. I think there's maybe 3 characters that didn't end up dating each other in this show.
And as you said that, I'll let you secret as well. Me and my wife, it was an office romance as well. So there you go.
See?
But the thing is, and this is the sitcom bit of it. I found it quite jarring when Angela's infidelity to Dwight or with Dwight comes out. The next episode or 2 episodes later, him and Andy are still best of friends in the office. That just felt a bit jarring, if you know what I mean. And but I think, to its credit, that just shows that those actors and the writing portrays these people as real people. And you're thinking that just wouldn't happen. That just wouldn't happen.
To an extent. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, I agree. That didn't seem how it should have landed. But we take the Dwight character and we take the Andy character who has anger management issues at that point. They have to create a respectable professional environment. And I think that's the one thing this show really does well for some of the characters, is really never going completely bizarre, violent, or HR issues over the top when it comes to altercations. They keep the topics simple. They keep the topics offensive at times, but they do keep a simplicity to it to really know that these two are going to have to interact in this episode, and it's going to be an ongoing thing. So I think when it comes to how they treated it, I'm kind of neutral on it because I can understand the direction that they're going to with these characters.
Yeah, and actually, you said something there, and I think we should probably just briefly. Well, I think we should address it. So, some of the storylines and some of the behaviors, whether you could do it in a series now, I don't know. But I think looking back at it, the whole point of those, and some people still won't like it, but it was to show that these people or those storylines were out of touch. You know, that way of thinking. You weren't. It almost like you weren't. Well, this is how I took it. You weren't supposed to laugh with them. You were almost supposed to laugh at their attitudes and what they were thinking at the time. Do you agree? Or
No, 100%. A lot of these episodes, I've always said, create conversation. They create a good dialogue of interpretation. I mean, even if we take those in the first season, a lot of these, like, borderline ridiculous, from the diversity episode to, I don't know, season 3 where Michael Scott kisses Oscar. A lot of these different interactions really are borderline if they would stay relevant today. But to me, I would say absolutely, because I love these shows, this content, these episodes that really do show an encouragement to open up dialogue. You don't have to agree with what Michael Scott does or what Dwight does or what these characters do, but the intent is not to get offended by it, but to open up a conversation around it and really take in the episode for what it's trying to do. And even if that's Andy punching a hole in the wall, Dwight dating multiple people, whatever it may be, I love the fact that this show has always been a discussion piece, and I love that about this content.
you've actually got to remember as well, it probably is in the last 15 years that these courses at work have really started becoming popular. And I'm not saying that people were just going around being really inappropriate before these, but I think that also ties in with a time where, you know, you have like there's a sexual the sexual harassment episode where they do like a HR course on that, and you've got
Yeah.
the diversity day. These things were probably fairly new then. So now it's mandatory as part of like onboarding as a new person at a company, isn't it? But back then it wasn't. You just rolled up and each character was each character. Now, the one thing I want to say, and again, we talked about HR, so and it's just put Toby into mind. I mean, apparently, I've got a friend of mine who is a huge fan of The Office as well, but he was saying that, yeah, sort of Steve Carrell is really good friends with Paul Lieberstein sort of outside. And I think that's what makes their interaction on screen even better. I kind of was changing subject slightly because when I think of him as well, so this show also had a number of the actors were writers as well. So Paul Lieberstein was actually a showrunner, wasn't he, for a number of years? And I actually found out that when he was showrunning or writing an episode, he intentionally didn't put himself in it because he didn't like doing it or he didn't like being the center of attention. You have BJ Novak and Mindy Kaling. They're writers as well, weren't they, for the show? Phyllis was a casting associate, I think, and they liked her so much when she was doing the script reads that they got her in. So I just think those sort of things are fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these writers, I think, really got into character, and they really they have to do table reads. So, and I think they really did get into this where they found ways to put it in. And the Phyllis character is, I love that character because it is the grandma of The Office. It is the sweetness of The
She's the same
Office.
age as him, as she keeps making sure that everyone
Yeah.
knows. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the fact that Phyllis is next to Stanley. You have all these ones that you
Yeah.
said earlier that are just there. They're like their 9 to 5 job. And here's one thing that stood out when you mentioned Toby. We started talking about Toby a little bit ago, and then we totally went off the rails or forgot about Toby, just like they would in the show. So I totally forgot we were about to talk about Toby. But when it comes to him, I think he portrays it, and you said it. He didn't want to be the center of attention, and he portrays this character as so. He's the HR manager that Michael Scott likes to poke fun at, and rightfully so, because he's the most unenergetic HR manager that I have ever seen. It's like they're trying to amplify the motif of what an HR manager is, and he is the most depressing HR manager I've ever encountered. So I think he plays that well. I think he amplifies it, and it really shows he doesn't want to be the center of attention. He just wants to listen to other people's problems, and just ensure that he has that 9 to 5 clock in and out and go home, and hopefully nobody files a complaint. So I think the Toby character is an overdone character, but I think it just works when it comes to how the other characters react to him.
He is overdone, but I allow it because for me, I think that is the joke. And there is that colleague, in the past, you've probably worked with a colleague who does wind you up. And I think the Michael's reaction to Toby is your inner voice to certain people just amplified out to be on show. Like there's one, I saw it recently, and it is mean. If you look at it, people will think he's mean if you're taking it just scene by scene. But the episode where Michael has to go to corporate because they fired Jan, and he's testifying, and at one point then he's having to go against the company he works for to defend his girlfriend. And Toby joins him at the dinner table, and he's saying, "Oh, I know how you're feeling. When I was a kid, my parents split up." And Michael just pushes his lunch slowly off the table onto the floor and gets up and walks away. And I was thinking, that is so mean. He's trying to reach out to him, but I couldn't stop laughing at the same time.
It's almost a sweet moment, but at the same time, it's comedic gold. That you can tell was an improvised moment of Michael Scott just really taking advantage of the situation where we're thinking this is going to be a good connection between Toby and Michael. And then we just have Steve Carrell say, nope, this isn't the episode that's going to happen. I'm just going to ruin this moment right now. And it's comedic gold on the episode. I'm glad you brought that one up because that one is hilarious.
And Toby, for me, also has... People always talk about the cringy moments, and an episode I want to discuss after, and I was listening to the Office Ladies podcast, people will often rank Scott's Tots as the cringiest episode. I've been thinking about that episode a lot today because I watched it yesterday. For me, do you know what one of the cringiest, or the minute where I thought, oh my God, is because we know Toby has always had a thing for Pam. And there's that scene where they're sitting next to each other, and he, without thinking, he just puts his hand on her knee. And I'm like, oh my God, because we've all been in that bit where we think you got to make sure you don't say the wrong thing or this or that. And just at that point, he puts his hand on and it lingers there. That shot lingers in that awkwardness. And for me, that's one of the worst scenes in a good way. What I mean is one of the cringiest scenes. It's that bit there.
I agree. I remember this because it's just one that you just look down at the ground and just wait till it's over because it's not going to end well, and you feel bad for Toby. I remember watching that for the first time, and that is the peak of the mountaintop in cringiness because again, it's not going to end well for Toby, and you feel for Toby a little bit. But at the same time, you're just like, my God, can you speed up this scene? Because I don't want to see this anymore.
Yeah, and fair play to him and Jenna Fischer for how they did that, because sometimes silence can say so more than words, can't it? I want to look at the finale, actually, because I watched it yesterday. But no, I want to look at the finale because for me, and I messaged you afterwards, didn't I? This for me is is a series with, I think, a really good final episode. I think we talk about so many times where the final episodes don't do a series justice. I think this one, I think this was a good one. I had a tear in the eye at one point, when Steve Carrell comes back. I think they did that brilliantly. I think the characters, all get their moment in the sun. I like the way they reveal things. So you might look at I don't know if you want to look at the finale as 2 episodes or one where they rerun the show and then you've got the final episode. There's the little things like Meredith, who is seen as the drunk and the one without inhibitions. She goes, well, I was at college for 7 years, but you never showed any of that. And Oscar's going, look, you filmed me for 9 years and you never once showed me doing origami. And again, that just really hammers home that it's a documentary and the program, like we say with reality TV, they only show you what they want you to see. So Meredith was at college. She goes, yeah, of course I was getting drunk.
This is a finale that is rare. Am I 100% satisfied with it? No, but do I think it's smart and at times even brilliant? Absolutely. But I think we could do a whole show on just a finale with how much is in here. At running off, I think at 52 minutes is what the last episode was. But the writers do shove a lot of happy endings and a lot of explanation into this episode, and they're ensuring that every character gets the end, gets their moment, and to an extent they do. We do see the Michael Scott character. To me, that one I didn't like with it because I think they introduced
Really?
him, which is brilliant. I love the introduction of the best man, but I think we could have used a little bit more of a summary from him because he's a big piece of this show. And I think he's underutilized when it comes to the emotional element. They go to give us that emotional sucker punch in the beginning of introduction, and then we really don't get anything at the end from him other than him just giving his monologue of calling the office his kids. So I think that's a little underutilized.
What did he say? It's like, see, my kids have all grown up and they've got married
Each
or
other.
they've married each other or something like that. Yeah.
So I think to me that was underutilized, but I love the documentary summary. I love the panel when they go up on stage talking about it. I love the fact that they strategically place the ending result for each character, that it does feel forced to an extent, but it feels satisfying. It's rare that we have a final episode like this that doesn't piss me off, but makes me feel good at the end because we get the end for all these characters we spent 9 years with and all these whatever hundreds of episodes that we've watched. So to me, I think it was very satisfying and emotional, except for BJ Novak that runs away with what's her face with and leaving the kid behind. That I think could have been left out because that kind of ruined the emotional aspect for it when you're leaving a newborn baby at a wedding.
Yeah, and I was going to say if I had to pick one thing that you look at it and think it would be that scene, but again I look at it and think that's that intentional, over the top, stupid bit of humor. Kelly and Rainn are both selfish people, and at least you've got the Catherine Tate character who quickly took. So this poor baby, in the space of about 5 minutes, had 3 different sets of custodians, and it was this cutest, giggliest little baby as well.
Well, the fact that the ending result and it leaves with the one that has the almost a bipolar disorder. So that's the one that the baby gets left with. But you're right, the baby is cute. That final shot of the baby just smiling into the camera is brilliant. That's going to be a future star here.
Also, the finale, like I said, it works for me on the 2 levels because, as I said right at the start, they kept that documentary vehicle going throughout it, and the panel I thought was a brilliant idea, having the panel a year later, because it's also a great idea of just advancing that time that little bit when they don't think there's anyone there, and then you see the queue outside and there's people asking questions. It's also got that line which I love and is a sad line, but also I think it fits in with how sad they must have been to finish this, where you got the Andy line, I wish there was a way of knowing you were in the good old days before you left them. I remember actually quoting that to somebody recently about something. And so you've got the fact that it works as a good ending for the show itself, but also it pulls the right emotional strings with you as the viewer as well. The funny thing was, I was thinking the only 2 characters, I know you couldn't do everyone, and I won't necessarily remember what happened to their characters, but there was no Jan or David Wallace, which I thought was a bit. That's the only thing. It would have been nice maybe to have seen them.
Yeah, and those 2 characters I think went off the rails. I know we get Jan in some of the later seasons. I know Wallace was up on stage at one point. We just don't know what happened to him, but we can assume that he lived happily ever after with his kids, with his son that bangs the drums 24/7. Um, but kind of you touched on it as well, is I think the emotional element with me, and I love the Andy quote. The Andy quote did resonate with me as well. But then the one that really did bring a tear to my eye, it asks the viewer to reflect. And I can't remember if it was the first part of the 2 episodes or whatnot, where Jim asked the documentary team to for some help with Pam and create that flashback in time. To me, that is one of the most tear-jerking moments because it's asking us to reflect on these seasons, and
Yeah.
that's important for a final episode or a final season to do, is have us reflect to get that emotional element, to make these characters relevant and ensure that they all get their proper goodbye on an emotional level. We spent so much time with Jim and Pam to love this couple and the individual characters. I thought that this was done to utter perfection to really kind of amplify and make us reflect, to the point where we get Pam in the final episode do something for Jim. Because even asking the panel, that was sweet of Jim to do that. What did you do for Jim? And it made Pam reflect and it made her think. And this is, again, one more alley oop to the character to see where they're going to go with it. And I love the fact of that last episode where we have Pam saying, "You shouldn't have to give up anything for me." And I thought that was a beautiful moment. And I thought it was a good example of two-way dialogue between the relationship. And it just perfectly puts a period on the definition of how these two interact as a married couple, and to leave us on a positive note that this couple is going to be okay. We don't need to see anymore.
Really good point, because also you've got the teapot letter makes the appearance as well, doesn't it? And that's a really good callback. And him asking the documentary makers to make a DVD of them is good, because if you were watching that show in real time, that's 10 years of your life as well. And we always think, we look back and we never take the moment to necessarily reflect on the good times, or you don't have a mixtape of your life, and he's able to do that. And I think you're also looking at it, and it makes you, like you said, it makes you look back and say, we've got to take the time to look at the positives that we've had. Apparently also that was his wife's idea to have that in. I think it was Emily Blunt, isn't it? Yeah, it was her idea to do that gesture in the program. Again, I think the ending was great. I guess a bit of sadness is that Jim and Pam are leaving, but Jim and Pam were never destined to stay in the office. And I think it's more my sadness, because I feel like Dwight was starting to become, or start to see Jim as a friend. And there's always been on and off elements of Dwight actually really liking Pam, wasn't there? He let it out a few times.
Yeah, and well, even Dwight says it at the end, is Pam was his best friend. He goes on that speech of defining each and every character in the Michael Scott type of dialogue at the end of the last episode. And yeah, he summarized it to define what their relationship is. And we have some great moments between Dwight and Pam throughout the seasons, of Pam being a little bit more emotional than Dwight has. But we can never read Dwight when it comes to how he feels about Pam to an extent. And again, that was the period on that relationship, saying, "She's my best friend." It's a beautiful moment, especially coming from Dwight, at least. It's the most we're going to get from him.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the last episode, there's almost a different persona in his body language. And I think I watched that last monologue probably about 4 different times, of how Rainn Wilson really portrays his Dwight character at this point. And it did seem kind of out of left field, and a little too late. But I think the way, if you look at his body language, it's a more positive Dwight. It's a happy Dwight compared to
Yeah.
what we've gotten in the previous seasons. And we don't really need it self-explained to us, because Rainn Wilson is up there showing us that he's happy. He doesn't need to say anything because we can see it. It's that subtle facial expression that Wilson does that is just pure brilliance. And to an extent, I want to see that. I wish I saw that a little throughout this season, but at the same time, I'm happy that that is kind of the final shot.
Yeah, it's like that little bit where they go to resign, hand in their notice, and he said, "No, you're fired." And they sort of wait, and he goes, "Shut up," he says, and it's that says it all about his transformation. Right, I'm kind of looking at the time. Oh, I wish we'd had 3 episodes on this. Favorite characters?
So I could go with the stereotypical Steve Carrell, Pam, whatnot. But you know what? Dwight is one that always resonated with me on adding that flair to the show. Not only that, but he's a Seattle resident, and I have to show favoritism. I think he grew up like 10 minutes from where I'm at. But Rainn Wilson is definitely my favorite. I think he's the one that really is the most consistent when it comes to the comedy and the success going through the 9 seasons.
For me as well, I think you got to say Steve Carrell is almost a given for me anyway. Yeah, I think Dwight is brilliant. I think you take Dwight out and it's not the show it is. I was going to pick another two, and these are not random because they are main characters, but Meredith and Creed, because I think they are not underplayed. But if you look at Meredith, she's done some funny roles. You know, the bit where she gets hit by the car, the bit with the bat. I think she's really underappreciated. And Creed is just, he's a bizarre character, isn't he?
He's the one that doesn't get a happy ending because he gets arrested at the end.
Actually,
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. Let's talk some episodes. So, favorite episodes.
This one I'm going to throw out there is my favorite episodes of The Office aren't necessarily the funniest. It's the ones that actually made me feel and I thought had a good balance. I think my favorite episode is the Goodbye Michael episode in season 7, episode 21. The way The Office comes together to support Michael, I thought it was an absolutely beautiful episode. And I think it's a perfect summary of Michael Scott and a perfect exit for him. So to me, I think that is my favorite episode. I think I get teary-eyed every single time I watch it. If I had to pick my favorite comedy one, I would have to say Diversity Day is the one that really got me to really follow this show. So I'm going to go with what really hooked me, which is season 1, episode 2 of Diversity Day. But I will give an honorable mention to season 5, episode 26 with Kevin spilling the chili because we haven't talked about that. So I'm going to at least
just saw that yesterday.
I'm just going to pop that one in to one of my favorites.
Right, I'm going to throw a few at you. Goodbye Michael is on my list. And again, I think what I like about that is it's almost he's the opposite to everything he's been before. Because he tells everyone he's leaving the next day, but he's not, he's leaving that day. So it's almost like he doesn't want that big goodbye. He doesn't want that attention because he knows it's going to be too much for him. So it's almost like he's doing the right thing for those around him. And then the bit with Pam at the end, Goodbye Michael. Yep. I've also got, in the same vein where you said about the darker episodes, Dinner Party stands out for me. I mean, that's a crazy episode, right?
That's a cringy episode, but a great episode.
Yeah, the bit with the plasma TV cracks me up every time.
Sometimes I just stare at it.
It's like, if you haven't seen it, it's about like 10 inches, isn't it, this plasma TV?
That he has to stand up and stare at the wall. I see what you did there.
I've got the Dundies. I think that's a fun episode. And again, it just shows where they pull for each other because he then starts getting abused, doesn't he, by other patrons of the restaurant, and they then come to his rescue. I did have Casino Night on here, but I think that's probably a cliched one. I think that's going to be on most people's list. And I also had Stress Relief just for the cold open. That's where Dwight sets fire or creates a fire alarm. Now, Scott's Tots, I wanted to speak to you. I did mention it. It is a cringy episode, right? So for those of you who haven't seen it, 10 years earlier, Michael visited a school and was so inspired by the kids. He said if they graduated, he would pay for their college tuition. Didn't realize, I think somebody worked out it would cost like $1.9 million or something like that. And he doesn't have the money, and the time comes and they call him back. Now, yeah, look, he did something wrong. But when you look at it, I think it's just 10 years earlier, he must have thought so much that he was going to be a success, but also was trying to do something good for those kids. It's just, it didn't work out. Now, what he should have done was say, look, I can't do this. One of the funny things he says in it that makes me laugh, he says, I've made a lot of empty gestures in my life, but this was by far the most generous one. Or something like that.
That's another one of those episodes that's really hard to watch, especially when you get to kind of the last like 10 minutes of it. But what I liked about that is that it doesn't go for the cliche. You go with Michael Scott going up there and explaining it almost with a subtle hint that they're going to forgive him. And then they end up not. And then it's just this pure, almost awkward silence of dialogue that it just kind of turned the script on what the viewer expected. So I think that one was cringy, but at the same time, it's one of those that, you know, Michael intended well for just a mere offer. It's hard to fault him for that. But at the same time, he is an asshole And I can totally feel these kids on the utter disappointment. I thought that's a great pick. I love that.
Yeah, it's like I said. Look, he definitely did he did the wrong thing, but it came from a point where he thought he would, and I think that is him down to a T. I think he wants to do the best, tries to do the best, but when it comes to it, I think he's afraid of failure and letting people down, so wants to hide away from it. Because you've got the scene where Stanley just starts laughing, belly laughing, when he realizes it's 10 years later and that he's got to go there. And you've just got the fact that Stanley knew it, but he could have said something. I think there are so many great episodes. You've got the Survivor, is it the Survivor Man, where Michael tries to live in the forest for 24 hours or 48 hours, and then Dwight has to rescue him because he eats some mushrooms off the ground.
Again, another one I'll put in there, Prison Mike for season 3.
Oh, yes.
So I think most of the great episodes came from season 3 and season 5. So you get all these great Michael personas like Willy Wonka in season 5, and then you get
Yes,
the Prison Mike. So there's just so many good Michael characters in this one that it's just so hard to pick just one. But Prison Mike has to be up there.
Yeah, the Willy Wonka one where he puts the golden tickets in, they all go to the same customer, don't they? And they get like 50% off. But then it turns out to be a genius idea. That's the thing. We're not necessarily going to get to it, but a couple of the a couple of the actors, they do go through quite a big transformation. I think for me, one of the main ones is Jan, isn't it? So she starts off she's in the pilot as this sort of strict, hard boss of his. By the end of it, she's sort of like some really crazy character, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean, and we get that in that dinner scene. We kind of see who she truly is in the episode where they're having dinner and their conflict in their relationship. But Michael is so infatuated and attached that somebody would go this far in a relationship with her that he is just would go to the ends of the earth for Jan. And we even see that when it gets to that lawsuit towards the end where he has to make that choice. So Jan, I think the amount of time she was in, I think, was appropriate because I think she was going to get very tiresome because she was just a placement character for Michael to play that crazy. They needed to find an out because at the end of the day, she was completely unlikable. And they can only stretch this character so far, from the mean boss to the relationship to the ex with breast implants to the sexual harassment. So they kind of went to the end of the path with it. But I think that the placement of her at the time was at the right timing.
She was mean to him, and I know we're saying Michael can be mean and do bad things like Scott's Tots, but the thing is, she's mean to the main character who you grow attached to, and that's the difference, I guess, isn't it? So I think, like you said, I think they planned her character out well. Even David Wallace, he goes through a bit of an odd change as well, doesn't he? From being, again, that corporate hard man to, like you said, towards the end, doesn't he turn inventor or something, doesn't he?
We have that scene, I think, that him and Michael are in a kiddie pool or whatever it may be, and he has this sucks machine or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but he goes on an eccentric entrepreneurship where he's trying to invent something. And I don't think we got a true explanation of what happened with that, but we can only assume that he wasn't a huge success. But there are little nuggets in the last episode where he goes to Oscar and says he would love to invest in Oscar's campaign because if you watch it, Oscar is running for Senate. So are nuggets that he did succeed in some aspect because from the last time we saw him, which is a really rugged, down on his luck dad, where he got laid off from Dunder Mifflin, to almost who we had in the beginning episodes of this professional guy that seems to have some money now.
And I guess the only other thing for me, I think what makes the show work well is having the actors on set doing their own paperwork at their desks in the background. I think that's what they said they did. They were encouraged to bring in their work, do photocopying, do their own bills, etc. So it did make it look like it was a living office. I think ultimately all I want to say is a great show, great characters, even the bit part characters. I can't remember his name, but like the security guy as well. Is it Hank?
Actually, I think it was Hank.
Daryl, and the warehouse guys as well. That's because it felt like a totally separate part. And at the start, you got the episodes like the basketball match. I mean, they're all starting to come to mind now. That's great. It's those whole dynamics. I think it really is a sitcom or a program about relationships, isn't it? And the bravado and the false bravado that a lot of the characters have. Oh, and I said it. I lied when I said one final thing. This is the final thing. When Michael meets Holly, that is his Pam, isn't it? They've got such a lovely, again, touching relationship. And it is heartbreaking when she gets moved to, I think, Colorado, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's that these two have the exact same personalities, and it's meant to be. And then when they're ending up at the company picnic and they're doing that skit when the company's about to
Yeah.
shut down, I mean, it's cringy, but it matches these two perfectly. Especially when she's trying to be an HR rep and he hates HR, he says in the beginning. So I think it's just poetry between these two, and I'm just glad that the story between these two kind of end with their exit. I just love that piece of it. I think it's a beautiful sentiment to these two characters.
Right. Justin, thank you very much. As I said, we could probably make this. I mean, if you fancy reviewing 201 episodes of a show, let me know. But no, thank you as always for coming on. We're already working on what the next show is going to be, and I've already started working, more importantly, on the skit for that. I do love doing these shows, are purely just a way for me to do those. Anything you want to say firstly before we go about The Office, or anything we didn't touch upon that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think we said it. I mean, this is one of those shows that's really hard to find something to dislike, except for some of the uncomfort to it. It's one of those classic TV shows that people can find relatability in something. And like I said earlier, what I really, truly value about this show is the fact that it does touch on a lot of uncomfortable topics, not only in the workplace, but some offensive topics at times that really does open up dialogue, not only for the topics, but the relationships. This is a true show of human nature. And like you said, relationships and how to build upon relationships. So there's a lot more than on the surface that's shown on The Office that you can take away, but it's so much deeper than that. When it comes to the emotional level, to a lot of the heart that's put into it. It's not just a comedy. It's a show that really does make you just feel good.
Yeah, I can't say anything else. You summed it up perfectly there. So what I'm going to say to you now is give everyone directions to your show. If anything exciting going on or anything interesting going on in the world of the Movie Wire and Back to the Balcony.
Me and Antonio for Back to the Balcony, we got a lot of great stuff lined up. I can't wait for people to listen to it. So make sure you tune into that. When it comes to the Movie Wire, I mean, when we're talking about successful careers like John Krasinski, we have If, my review coming out this week. Depending on when this comes out, you can listen to that previous episode. But the part of the success of the actors that we have in this show right now are going to be in my next episode, which is perfect timing. But you can check those out anywhere you listen to podcasts at The Movie Wire, and you can follow me on socials at Movie Wire Show.
And you're listening to me, so you know where to get me on the podcast platforms. If you want to drop me a note, you can look for Casting Views across all social media or castingviewspod@gmail.com. If you've got any shows that you'd like me and Justin, more importantly, to have a look at the pilot episode, and as the show evolved, let me know, because we're always looking ahead to try plan these in. Justin, all that's to say is, again, thank you so much. Love having you on. And yeah, it's always a blast having these conversations with you.
I love our quality time, Dan. Anytime.
Right. I will see you all next week for another episode of Casting Views.
1, 2, 3, 4.
If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, take what we got, 'cause you